Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Seth.
And I'm Zach.
And we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.
We're getting close to the end of summer.
We are.
Soon we'll begin the beginning of fall.
Yeah.
Then, I don't know, then winter.
And then winter, and then it'll be spring, and then it'll be summer again, and then we do this
don't forget about this. There's PAX in between.
Oh, PAX is in between. That is its own season, and then we do the whole thing over again.
That's right. Do you change your games that you're playing based on the season around you, or
I thought you were going to ask me if I changed my underwear.
Based on the seasons around you?
Yeah, basically just based on the
time to get out of my... Yeah, gotta get out my my summer underwear and get into my fall one.
No, I don't really change the theme of like the games I'm playing. I mean, sometimes I'll probably play more horror games in the fall just because it is closer to October, and then I'll probably play more horror games in October. But I don't I'll still play other games in October, and I'll play horror games outside of October. Yeah, not really. What about you?
Yeah, same. I I just struggle to continue to play any game for any significant period of time, let alone changing them for the holiday seasons.
Well, yeah, it's like, I don't know. I like games that I can like get back into and be exactly where I was. One of the things I've struggled with Doom Awakening, despite the fact that I love it, is that if you don't play it for a long time, then certain things start failing on your base. And so you do, which I guess encourages you to keep logging back in, right? Because it is an online game. But at the same time, if I recently moved, before I moved, I made sure to prep my base to make sure it wasn't going to shut down. So I loaded all the fuel cells with enough fuel to last 18 days in game. You also accumulate tax debt.
Oh, Dune.
Dune.
Yes. Yeah. Dune. Yeah. For a little while, I thought you said Doom.
No, not Doom.
And then I
Doom.
thought that there was an online Doom game that you had to continue to maintain. No. And I just thought that, does hell just get worse? I don't...
It does. No, Dune Awakening.
Are you enjoying Dune?
I am. I need to get back into it, actually, and check on my base, make sure it didn't collapse.
Somebody just went in and stole all your power supplies.
So the game is nice. All your stuff is yours, unless you abandon the game for a month or two, but that's because you don't pay taxes. You forgot to pay your taxes. That's fair.
If you logged in and just paid your taxes, you'd be okay?
Yeah, if you logged in and paid your taxes and updated your fuel stuff, I'm sure you're fine. But you do have to unless you're end game and you're making a bank of money, it takes a bit to accumulate money in Dune. I won't be able to process spice for a few more levels. I have a bunch of spice ready to be processed, but I can't do anything with it. It's just sitting in my base.
That's fair. That's valid.
I haven't been playing Dune recently, though. I've been playing a different game, Seth, which the game I've been recently playing is Mario Kart 64. So because I recently moved, one of my things that I do when I move is set up my consoles and make sure they still work. Video game consoles, being older, sometimes get jostled around in a move, and I've occasionally had things fail on me during a move. I had my Apple II stop working from one move to the next and require me to reseat the RAM. So I wanted to make sure my N64 was still in working order. I assumed it was, but I set it up, hooked it up to my TV in my office, and plugged in a copy of Mario Kart 64 and played that for a bit. Mario Kart 64 is a great game, released in 1996. You play as Mario characters and you drive around in karts. Karts spelled with a K because they are small go-karts. You pick up various items and such, and you can use these items against your enemies, such as there's the mushroom, which makes you go faster. There are the turtle shells. Green will just kind of go in the direction you shoot it. Red will home in on the person in front of you or the nearest person to you. And there are also the blue shell, which you can launch if you're in last place, and that will knock out the person in first place. I like Mario Kart 64. I think it's a fun game. I think I prefer Double Dash for the GameCube, as I think Double Dash is a bit more hectic because you are two people on a go-kart instead of just one. So you have to swap out your character every now and then. You can bank items, so one character can hold an item while the other character uses a different item. I think Double Dash is a bit more fun in that regard, but Mario Kart 64 64 is still absolutely a solid time. I love playing it. What about you, Seth? What have you been recently playing?
Recently, I've been playing Is This Seat Taken, developed by Pody Pody Studio and published by Wholesome Games. It was released back on August 7th of 2025. It's a logic puzzle game where you're essentially taking these shapes that are personified as people and putting them in seats that they want to sit in. You may be doing it for them on a bus or a train or a classroom or a plane or a plane's lobby. Every level has a number of people, and you have to place them into various different seats, and they'll have requirements. So it may be like you're watching a sports game and people want to be in the fourth row, but also sitting next to somebody who's eating popcorn, so they could steal popcorn. So then you have to find somebody who also wants to sit in that row, or doesn't care what row they sit in, but have popcorn and can sit next to that person who's stealing popcorn. There's also like anti-levels where you have to be in a classroom and you have to put people who want to do something not next to the person that they want to do it with, because they may want to talk to somebody. So then you have to put them next to somebody who they won't talk to, because if they talk to somebody, then they'll annoy everybody and they will be distracted and they won't concentrate, which is what the teacher wants. So
Right.
You have to put them in all the locations that the teacher wants. There's also like an office place where you have to put people near or farther away from their boss because they want to sleep or something. So you have to put them in the corner so they can sleep, or next to the watering machine or the vending machine.
Right.
And you can move some stuff around. And it's very addicting. Fun little puzzle game. It's currently 10% off, I think was through to August 21st, so I think it's not 10% off anymore. But it's a cheap game. It's $9.99. The introductory offer was 10% off, so I picked it up for $8.99. But $9.99. So far, I've got about 5 hours worth of play in it, and I only paid $9, and I feel like it was 5 hours more enjoyable than some movies that I've watched, and I paid a lot more for those.
And movies are expensive.
Yeah, and they're not always good. It's a fun game. I've been playing it primarily on my Steam Deck on the couch. Works perfectly with the Steam Deck, but I'm sure it works fine with mouse and keyboard. I actually played it during Next Fest. I don't know if we talked about it during did we do an episode about Next Fest?
You talked about it a little bit because it was one of your recently plays was a Next Fest game.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's now recently played as an owned game because it was released. I played it during the Next Fest. I was excited about it coming out. I wishlisted it and it came out and I bought it because I thought that the demo was a lot of fun and that the real game was going to be more of the demo. And I, in fact, was right. And the real game was more of the demo. And thus, it's also overwhelmingly positive right now on Steam. So
that's
out
good.
of 1,000 reviews. So it's a decent throughput right now for reviews.
Well, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about a series. We're talking about a few games in this series, and we're doing it as a listener suggestion. So our friend of the podcast and listener, Sean, a.k.a. producer Doug's intern, asked us to talk about the Clock Tower games. So, Sean, this episode is for you. We talked a bit about Clock Tower before, largely because we've either had it as retro rewinds or recently plays. It's also been referenced when talking about horror games or Super Nintendo games. I actually went back and looked in our Super Nintendo episode, which was like one of the earliest Classic Gaming Brothers episodes. Clock Tower is listed in my list of fun Super Nintendo games. So we've definitely referenced it before. And we talked about it a bit when we covered the Wonder Swan console. However, we've never done our usual Classic Gaming Brothers breakdown of this classic horror series. Now, the original Clock Tower was developed by Human Entertainment. Founded in 1983, Human Entertainment was a Japanese company that got their start working on games for the Nintendo Famicom. Some games they worked on included Gyrodyne, Monster Party, Stadium Events, and Adventures of Gilligan's Island, as well as other sports titles. In fact, by the time the Super Nintendo came out, Human worked on a lot of sports titles. They had Super Soccer, Super Final Match Tennis, they had a Taekwondo game, they had a ton of variants of soccer, but they did dip their toes into some non-sports titles. One of these was an action game called The Fireman, which I believe is available on the Switch Super Nintendo online service. So the Switch has that emulation service that you can use to play SNES games and NES games, and occasionally they put in Japanese exclusive games or European exclusive games. One of those games they have on there, I'm pretty sure, is The Fireman, where you play as firefighters. They also would develop and release the horror game Clock Tower. The director for Clock Tower's development was Hifumi Kono, who was a huge fan of Italian horror director Dario Argento. Argento has been referred to by some as the master of the thrill, and he made his name by developing horror films and giallo films throughout the 1970s and the 1980s. For those unaware of the term, giallo is used to refer to a specific Italian cinema that uses tropes like eroticism, psychological horror, slasher elements, and supernatural things. One of these giallo films created by Dario Argento was Phenomena, a film about a young girl, played by Jennifer Connelly, at a Swiss boarding school who develops psychic powers and uses them to locate a serial killer that has been killing the young girls that also go to the boarding school. It's very much a giallo style plot. Is just like, young girl has superpowers, also other girls are there getting murdered. Hifumi Kono from Human Entertainment was a big fan of Phenomena and wanted to adapt elements of the movie into his game. In fact, the main character of Jennifer Simpson in Clock Tower was visually inspired by Jennifer Connelly's character in Phenomena, who's also named Jennifer. The story of Clock Tower also shares some similarities to Phenomena. In the game Clock Tower, the story is mainly focused on a young girl who must explore a vast and abandoned house while searching for her missing schoolmates, while a serial killer called the Scissor Man, who carries a large pair of scissors, stalks and will attack her.
Clock Tower had a relatively small budget, and Kono realized that it was also fairly experimental for the time. Like, for an example of it being experimental, you don't actually fight the main villain, the Scissor Man. Instead, you have to run and hide from him, which in the ages of, like, Contra and beat-em-up games, like, that's not what you do when you see the enemy, but in this game, it is. And it was considered fairly unique in gaming at the time, and reportedly, some of Kono's co-workers felt that players would enjoy it. The smaller budget led to some developing restrictions, such as the lack of mouse support and a smaller map size than originally planned. The sprite work in the game was done by digitizing photos of real people, with the actress that plays Jennifer in the game being someone from the Humans Planning Office, which is a great name for the Human Resources Department, and it also sounds like also some people that would be involved in a horror game.
Human Entertainment has a very creepy name for a company that mostly made sports titles.
Oh, it's the Humans Planning Office because it's Humans is the company,
yes,
right?
Yes, yeah.
I was thinking it was their, like, how they planned for humans.
No. It is the Humans Entertainment Planning Office. But doesn't, like, Human Entertainment sound like, I don't know, like something, do you remember Adult Swim and those weird bumpers that sometimes popped up?
Yeah.
Doesn't Human Entertainment sound like something you'd read on one of those weird bumpers?
Yeah, or just like something that, like, a group of aliens would come to Earth and be like, we are going to be Humans Entertainment as a company because we are entertaining humans.
We are setting up the Humans Planning Office to have human entertainment.
Exactly. Now, Clock Tower would go to be released in 1995 on the Super Famicom and would later get ported to Windows 95, and a monochrome version would be released on the WonderSwan. The game was only released in Japan, and in 1996, the game was ported to the PlayStation and renamed Clock Tower: The First Fear. And that would go on to sell about 54,293 copies, which is a lot, but also a little. The PlayStation version added a dagger that you could use, new rooms, and full motion video. The next game, Clock Tower 2, would be developed for the PlayStation 1 and was built to be a fully 3D game. Reportedly, Kono didn't want to make a sequel. He only relented after he saw what the next generation hardware was capable of and felt it made more sense to do an updated version using the new hardware. There was some serious consideration about what to release the game for, as the PS1 and Sega Saturn were both on the market and the N64 was on its way. After some debate, they decided on the PlayStation 1. One downside about picking the PlayStation 1 meant that there was a competition, as Capcom had announced Resident Evil, which was also a 3D horror game. The Clock Tower 2 team worked to try and make sure their game had better graphics than the Resident Evil game and took a material comes first approach. They used 3D graphics extensively and also animated various death sequences to make dying in the game unique.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting the way they went about it. Resident Evil and Resident Evil 2 do some creative use of 2D sprite work and stuff like that to make things look 3D. Resident Evil is a 3D game. I'm
right.
not lying about that. But because of the fixed camera angles, you can do some fun things with like flat backgrounds to make perception appear 3D, but not actually have 3D geometry. However, with Clock Tower 2, they were like, we are going full 3D on this thing.
They could also call out that their competition wasn't full 3D.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the plot of Clock Tower 2 follows Jennifer from the first game again, and it takes place a few months after the events of the first game. Jennifer has been adopted by a criminal psychology professor named Helen. Due to the trauma of the Scissorman case, Jennifer begins undergoing psychological treatment at a university in Norway. A year later, after her treatment, Scissorman returns, and Helen begins to search for information on his return. In the game, you can play as either Helen or Jennifer, with your goal, of course, being to escape Scissorman and find various items related to solving the mystery. Like the first game, it plays as a point-and-click adventure, but this time with a 3D environment. They also worked to make the game compatible with the PlayStation mouse, which for those of you who did not know, the PlayStation had a mouse. It looks like a normal mouse, but just has the Sony logo on it, and it is compatible with only a few games, including Clock Tower 2. Unlike the first game, which was not compatible with the Super Nintendo mouse. And for those of you who did not know, the Super Nintendo also had a mouse that was also only compatible with a few games. Clock Tower 2 would be released in 1996 in Japan, and the next year would actually get released in North America. However, there is a problem. The rest of the world did not have Clock Tower 1 for the Super Famicom or PlayStation 1. And you can't just go and release a sequel to a game that didn't exist. So they renamed the game Clock Tower for the North American and European market. Clock Tower 2, or Clock Tower if you prefer, sold well. Over 500,000 copies reportedly were sold during its time on the market, and Human Entertainment staff also reportedly received a bonus thanks to the good sales. Kono would later state that he believes Resident Evil, despite being competition, helped, as people were interested in horror games now because Resident Evil was available, so they might have been looking for more horror games to play, and Clock Tower was available. Score-wise, the game also did fairly well, with mostly positive reviews. Next Generation gave it a 4 out of 5, EGM gave it a 7.6 out of 10, Famitsu gave it a 30 out of 40, and there were some negative reviews. Most of them came from IGN and GameSpot, who praised the horror elements and the story, but criticized the game as being a bit too slow and not as action-centric as a game like Resident Evil.
I do think it's pretty interesting that they 10x'd their sales, though, from Clock Tower 1 being released in 96 to 54,000, and Clock Tower 2 also being released in 96 to 500,000 sales.
To be fair, though, Clock Tower 1 only saw release in one area, Japan, and Clock Tower 2 / Clock Tower, this version, was a worldwide release.
And is the 54,000 only PlayStation 1 ports of Clock Tower?
Yeah, I couldn't find the numbers for the original Super Nintendo version.
So it may be decently high for the original Super Nintendo, and also if people were importing it.
For a Japanese exclusive, I'm sure 54,000 is probably decent numbers for the 1990s.
Clock Tower 2 did well enough that a sequel would go into development. The sequel would be the last Clock Tower game to be developed by Human, and also the first not to be directed by Kono. Kono stepped away from the series because he felt that after 2 games, he was done telling the story and it was out of material. Replacing him as director for the sequel would be Yukata Harada. The sequel is interesting for a few reasons. For one, in Japan, it's not a sequel. It's considered a spin-off, and they intentionally did not give it a game in a numbered title. In Japan, it's known as Clock Tower: Ghost Head. When it came to America, however, they opted to sell it as a direct sequel, and thus it became Clock Tower 2: The Struggle Within. And this is evident not just in the story being different, but also the plot, as it sets itself in a different continuity than the rest of the Clock Tower games, and those are considered fictional in this game's universe. So they're 2 different games, the Japanese version and the American version?
No, they're the same game. It's just the American version decided to hone in on the sequel element, while the Japanese version recognized the fact that the game is not a sequel, it is a spin-off. It is such a spin-off that they reference Clock Tower as a fictional thing.
Oh.
In Clock Tower Ghost Head / The Struggle Within, Clock Tower is a game that exists in their world.
Gotcha.
It'd be like if in Mass Effect Andromeda they referred to Mass Effect as a video game.
Yes, and in the American version, it's canon.
Yes.
But in the Japanese version, it is in fact a spinoff.
Yes.
The Japanese version of the game also differs location-wise from the North American version, with the Japanese version being set in Osaka, Japan, and the North American version being set in Osaka's counterpart in America, California. For fans of horror, Roger L. Jackson, best known for his role as Ghostface in Scream, plays the character of Mr. Bates in Clock Tower 2. I never really considered Ghostface actor when thinking about Ghostface.
To be fair, spoilers for Scream, but he is like Darth Vader in that I think he's played by 3 different people.
Yeah, for sure. The plot features Alyssa Hale, a 17-year-old girl who visits her father's friend Philip. Alyssa is cursed in that she has the soul of a person named Bates trapped within her, perhaps even Mr. Bates. She would undergo therapy to keep Mr. Bates at bay, and it didn't go so well. When Alyssa arrives at Philip's house, no one is at home, and her cousin Stephanie attacks her with a knife and begins to stalk her around the house. Your goal is to find out what is going on in this game, and also zombies eventually show up.
Yeah, it's a complex game. It is complicated from what I was trying to parse. I haven't played Clock Tower 2. There is an element in the game where you can swap between Alyssa and Mr. Bates. Mr. Bates has his own type of gameplay segments, while Alyssa's segments are a bit more akin to the traditional Clock Tower. But it's interesting nonetheless. Clock Tower 2 was released in Japan, again as Clock Tower Ghost Head, in 1998 and brought to America in 1999. A drama CD was also released in Japan based on the game, which is fun. I like when they do that. There's a few games that got drama CDs. I think Legend of Zelda had a audio drama associated with it in Japan, but my favorite thing that has a thing associated with it in Japan as an audio drama is the television show Supernatural, which has a Japanese-only audio drama, which I just think is fun.
That's fun.
Now, Clock Tower 2 didn't get good reviews. It, in fact, did pretty poorly. Famitsu gave it 24 out of 40, GameSpot gave it a 3.9 out of 10, and IGN gave it a 4.8 out of 10. People criticized a lot of parts about it. They criticized the plot, they criticized the puzzles, they criticized the gameplay. Basically everything about the game got criticized. In fact, I think even the music in the game got criticized. It just all got criticized. Most recently, critics have said that the game is pretty niche. So if you are a person who likes collecting PlayStation 1 games and specifically is trying to collect all of the PlayStation 1 horror titles, you probably want to pick up Clock Tower 2. It is kind of a grail for some people who have that particular niche interest. However, it's best left for collectors. Oddly enough, the game did still win an award. It won the Console Game of the Year award in 1999 from the Electronic Playground, beating out the PlayStation 1 release of Broken Sword 2. What a close call that was, probably. Human Entertainment would close its door in 2000, but this wouldn't be the end of Clock Tower. Sunsoft would actually obtain the rights to the series, and in 2001, Capcom announced they were bringing Clock Tower 3 to PlayStation 2. The game was going to feature character designs from Kita Amemiya, who worked as a character designer and director for various tokusatsu projects like Kamen Rider. It also featured a story written by Noboru Sugimura, who previously worked on the Super Sentai series as well as working on Resident Evil and Dino Crisis, and the cutscenes in the game were directed by filmmaker Kinji Fukasaku, who had previously worked on the Star Wars knockoff film Message from Space in 1978. He also worked on the Japanese portions of Tora Tora Tora, and would also be the director of Battle Royale in 2000. Battle Royale is a great movie. It is like Hunger Games, but depressing. The game moved away. Clock Tower 3 would move away from the point-and-click mechanics and instead be a third-person survival horror game where you have direct control over the character. You aren't given a weapon during the game beyond in certain sequences where you have to fight creatures known as subordinates using a long bow made of energy.
The story follows a girl named Melissa Hamilton who has been sent to a boarding school by her mother. Her mother is fearful for Alyssa's life as her father, Dick, disappeared, and she received a letter from him that warned her to hide Alyssa until she turned 15. Alyssa leaves the school against her mother's wishes and meets a figure known as the Dark Gentleman, who sends her back to the London Blitz, and she must face off against a sledgehammer-wielding killer and soon finds herself traveling to different time periods meeting other killers, which sounds horrible. Like, it's like you have the ability to time travel, but you can only use it to find people who want to kill you.
Yeah.
And also, can she fight them now, or does she still just run away?
You fight them in sequences at the end of like the sections of the games, but you have like a holy bow made of light energy and you shoot them with bow arrows.
Oh, yes.
It's a very interesting game.
Two killers you get to encounter in the game are the Scissor Man and the Scissor Woman, who are reimagined versions of the original Scissor Man from the first Clock Tower. Clock Tower 3 would be released in Japan in 2002 and later in North America. What's fun is that because Japan already had a Clock Tower 2, which was our Clock Tower 1, and we had a Clock Tower 2, which was Japanese spin-off that was unnumbered, then the game was released with the same name. This didn't stop the game from being a commercial failure, though. Capcom had projected that they would sell 450,000 units, and they would end up selling 122,000 by 2003. The game would go on to receive overall mixed reviews, with GameSpy giving it a 2 out of 5, GameSpot giving it a 7.3 out of 10, and Game Revolution giving it a C. Critics praised the script and the cinematic sequences, with most criticism being lobbed at the actual gameplay and boss fights.
Yeah, Clock Tower 3 is an interesting game, and it would sadly be the last official Clock Tower game. That was it for the franchise. Sunsoft said, we tried, and Capcom said we certainly did, and they did not get the sales they wanted. A spiritual successor of sorts would release in 2005 under the name Haunting Ground, also from Capcom. The game carries a lot of similar elements from Clock Tower 3. It's very much kind of the same kind of style as Clock Tower 3, but visually it is distinct. However, if you want to try to find a copy of Haunting Ground, because maybe you're a big fan of Clock Tower, you never heard of Haunting Ground, you want to give it a shot, good luck. It is stupid expensive. Loose copies of Haunting Ground for PlayStation 2 go for $258. That's loose. That means the disc is floating around in like a slipcase. A new in-box copy can fetch upward to $630, and that's on the low end. There was a few years ago where I think it was fetching $1,000 or $2,000. Another spiritual successor is a lot easier to find. It's available on Steam, and that game would be Nightcry, which would come from Hifumi Kono himself in 2016. Nightcry follows a point-and-click style of gameplay, similar to the old style Clock Tower games, where you have to escape a serial killer who is stalking you. I'm pretty sure that serial killer also has a giant pair of scissors. Now, the original Super Nintendo PlayStation 1 version of Clock Tower was re-released in 2024 as Clock Tower Rewind for modern consoles and PC. Prior to the release in 2024, the only way to play the game was through fan translations, such as a Super Nintendo reproduction copy that you could acquire, which was available via third-party markets and such. I have a copy of the SNES reproduction copy fan translation. It's pretty good. And that's how I played Clock Tower for the first time. And that will do it for our Clock Tower episode. I think it's a really interesting series. I'm always really fascinated by Clock Tower, and maybe someday we won't revisit it. We talked about every single Clock Tower game out there, but maybe someday I'll try to play through all of them, and they will be my recently plays or something.
Yeah, sure. And who knows, maybe we'll just gaslight everybody and do another Clock Tower episode. Or we'll put this one in the bid because we don't like doing episodes for Sean.
Maybe.
Producer Doug doesn't like it when his intern gets episodes done, so prepare for an angry post from Producer Doug's Facebook group. So if you ever want to follow our producer, you can follow him at Producer Doug on Facebook.
Now, getting into our retro rewind, Seth had me play Dynamite Headdy for the Genesis. It's a classic game and one of the more solid mascot platformers that came out in the wake of Sonic. You play as Headdy, who is a weird looking guy who can throw his head at people. I don't know what he is. He looks kind of like a bird. I don't think he's a bird, but he looks like a bird.
He's a Dynamite Headdy.
He's a Dynamite Headdy. That's what he is. Dynamite Headdy has some great colorful graphics, has some great music, a lot of fun set pieces. It's just overall a solid game. It very much bleeds Genesis. It is the game that when I see it, I think Sega Genesis. I think it 100% holds up. And next week, Seth, I want you to play a Sega Genesis game. I want you to play Light Crusader for the Sega Genesis.
Great. I'm looking forward to that. You also had me play another Sega Genesis game recently, and that was Krusty Super Funhouse for the Sega Genesis. It was developed by Audiogenic and published by Acclaim Entertainment for consoles and Virgin Games for home computers. In it, you play as Krusty the Clown and use objects like blocks to herd mice into a device that is operated by Bart Simpson that bonks them on the head. It's kind of like Lemmings, if the Lemmings were mice and they were killed at the end. It's decidedly a puzzle game. It was released on the Genesis back in '92 in both the North American and European markets. It was also released on the MS-DOS, SNES, NES, Game Boy, Game Gear, and Master System. Puzzle games at this time were released everywhere. I think partly because they were broad appeal, and also partly because the more places you release them, the more sales you would get. I felt like the game was fun and unique, if not a little obtuse. However, it does hold up because of the one reason that it does not time you, which is great. Whenever a game is obtuse and it times you, it is horrible. and it makes me mad. But when games are obtuse and they're not timed, then you can kind of play them at your will and explore. Sounds like if you're pretty good at the game, you could probably play it within under an hour. Me, who knows? It would probably take me better half of a week. Anyway, I think it holds up, especially if you're a Simpsons fan. Next week, Zach, you could play The Rocketeer for the NES.
Sounds good. I can't wait to play that. I think The Rocketeer is a fun movie, so I'm sure it will be well adapted into a fun game.
Just like everything else that came out in the 90s.
That's for sure. Well, that will do it for our episode for today. Sean, I hope we lived up to your expectations. If not, don't tell us. If anyone has any memories of playing any Clock Tower games, let us know. Email us at classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. We're available wherever podcasts can be found. We have Podbean, iTunes, or iHeartRadio. We're available on social media. We have Classic Gaming Brothers, CG Brothers Pod. Look us up. We also have the Producer Doug Facebook page. Be sure to like that. We also have a YouTube and a Twitch. Follow us there. With that, I don't think I'm forgetting anything. Oh, our website, classicgamingbrothers.com. Now I don't think I'm forgetting anything, but I could be. Seth, what am I forgetting?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.